Um, as usual with our August meeting, we don't have a lot of people back into the groove of coming in, but I thought I'd talk about, some of you were aware, and Geraldine, when she was here, talked about it a little bit, that Symphony in the Flint Hills event this summer. The theme this year was Weather in the Flint Hills, which we'll see was ominous, I guess, for a choice of theme. But I just wanted to kind of report back and give everybody a little bit of the details of how that event works and what all's going on. So in the event that anybody might want to volunteer and help out next year at the event, they'd be able to. So it was located in a place called Irma's Pasture in Chase County. It's out in the Flint Hills. That's all I'll say. There was a large perimeter of single wire electric fence around the event because it really is a working cattle pasture.
So you got to keep the symphony people in.
Keep the 7,000 people in and keep the 70,000 cows out. Although they were right up against it in a few places. But this was about halfway between, the parking lot where we had to park our cars and the actual event. It's over a mile from the parking lot to the event. They do have what they call people movers. They're tractors with big flatbed trailers on the back, and but they do have bench seating on them, so you can ride back and forth. But it's hard to carry gear, and we'll talk about that a little towards the end. So this is from where our tent location was. The big tent on the right is the food tent. So we had lots of traffic all day long, having the food tent quite so close. All these other tents were different themed tents, and each one of those tents had, in addition to presentations like ours did, some of these down at the end were selling souvenirs, and they had some art auctions and some other things that were going on at the same time. The actual concert took place right on the back side of these tents. The hill went down, and the amphitheater was set up for the symphony down where you couldn't see it from where we were. We were obviously at the stargazing tent, so you can see everybody there getting set up with solar observing, which was part of the daytime activities that we did. So there was probably a dozen telescopes set up for the solar observing part of the. Some of these pictures were not of my taking, so the focus isn't great. But we did have a pretty good turnout of people as the afternoon went by. We also had presentations in our tent. We had a presentation about light pollution, about the evolution of the Earth's atmosphere. We had there was a gal who had a blown up version of that Sky Maps, monthly Sky Map. Everybody got one of those, and she kind of walked them through how to read that and how to use that. And then I did a presentation on meteorites at the end of the afternoon.
Did you bring some from your collection?
I did. Yeah. I did bring a few. Didn't bring a whole lot, but maybe 2 dozen. So there was during one of the presentations. So, we could fit, with the hay bales arranged like we had them, we could fit about 70 or 80 people under the tent in the shade during the presentations. which was pretty good. They also had, you can kind of see it as it goes off here into the distance. They had like a static solar system. There was a area where they were doing moon phases, just some general information. Geraldine was here just doing some general astronomy information here. So we had a lot of other little stations going on during the day besides just the solar.
What's a static solar system?
So it was each one of those signs was a planet off to the right. There was a string or a cord attached to each one of those signs for that planet that stretched out the equivalent, or the distance based on the scale of this model. And so you could just see how, if you walked up to the sign for Jupiter, you could read a little bit about Jupiter. You could follow the cord way out, and you could see a marker way out, in the field that was Jupiter. And you could follow the line, so it was easier to see, which was kind of cool. And then this area called Goat Hill, which is one of the highest spots on the property, which was about 1.5 miles from where we were, so it's over 2 miles from the parking, because it's in the opposite direction. They were shuttling people up to this area. They had binoculars on tripods up there because you could get a good view of the Newt Rockne Memorial from there, which is literally out in the middle of Oak Place, Kansas. But you could get a pretty good view of it from up there. And then they had some extra binoculars that people just wanted to, scan around and look at anything else while they were up there. You can tell by the flags up above that, as is common in the Flint Hills, it was a windy day. It was a hot and windy day, I'll say, until the storm came through. It cooled off pretty good after that. So here's the venue for the concert, which was down the hill, so we couldn't even see the top of it from where we were located. They think that there was the estimate for the crowd, and they would know that the estimate, because people paid to buy tickets, was about 7,000 people were in attendance, or at least had purchased tickets. There was probably another 500 volunteers there on top of that. So it was a pretty large crowd. That's one of the reasons why it was spread out over such a large area. They also had some other things. They had like covered wagon rides. If you wanted to take a tour of the property, they were pulling. They had some horseback riding. There were a few other things that were available to people that weren't necessarily right there on that main area. Here we go. So this storm was moving along the Kansas-Nebraska border, moving pretty much straight east all morning. And then it got to Manhattan and hit a wall. I'm not sure, but it pretty much started coming straight south and a little bit east from Manhattan. And so we were thinking all morning long, oh, that's all going to be north of us. But as the afternoon dragged on, we could see it was basically headed right for us. So this picture was from about 6 o'clock, 6:30 maybe in the evening. So you can see just by the lights on inside the tents and everything how dark it had got. And that was just the leading edge of the storm. But there's a less professional picture, but same same aspect. This was, again, looking, our immediate next door neighbors were the line of latrines. So all the pictures with latrines in them are from our area. Luckily, the wind was blowing. We were upwind from the latrines, so we didn't have to smell them all day long. But yeah, it was a pretty good storm. There is a picture right in the midst of it. That's actually taken through a car window. Hey, how are you? So, at intermission of the symphony concert, they announced that they were canceling the event. They gave everybody, since everybody was together in that one big area, they gave everybody specific instructions on how to leave and, that sort of thing. We were fortunate in our area because they had let us keep one vehicle up on the top. It was actually, we parked it back behind the food tent. And so they were able to get us, well, they told us ahead of time, right as the concert started, that they were meeting right then with the National Weather Service, and there was a pretty good chance that they were going to make a decision to cancel the event. So they told us to get our stuff packed up. So we were packing all of our stuff up just as the concert was starting. They took that one vehicle and shuttled all of us that had gear down to the parking lot, and while the people were down at the concert and there weren't people walking around, they allowed us to bring our cars back up, which is normally a no-no, and it's open and people are walking. They don't let any vehicles other than the people movers up in the area. But so we were able to get, for the most part, out. A few of us got out, completely out of the parking lot and back out on the highway before the storm actually started. I was fortunate to be one of those, but I'd say 2/3 of our group were in their car, as were all the concert goers when the storm actually hit. That's kind of a cool picture.
Yes, that is great.
But that gives you an idea of, there's basically one or two ways out. One was a gravel road, and then they created another path so that they could at least get two lines of vehicles trying to leave at the same time. And that's a little bit of the aftermath after the storm went through. So thankfully, there weren't any people up top when the storm actually went through. They were all either had left or in vehicles in the parking corral. So, but yeah, it tore everything up. And this is if everyone remembers, I think it was maybe in 2019 when they had to cancel the event altogether because big storm hit the night before the event and basically tore everything up, kind of like this. And then 3 or 4 years before that, they had another weather incident where they had to, the event's always on a Saturday, but they have a Sunday as a rain day, just in case, where they had to move it to the rain date. All 3 of those were at this location. They've never had any weather incidents at the other locations at all, so they're beginning to think that maybe Irma's pasture is, got a little something else going on besides just. It's thankfully they did a great job of evacuating everybody. This doesn't have any sound, but this is a little video that the Symphony on the Flint Hills put together about the event. And I just thought I would let it kind of play through. It's like a silent movie, isn't it? This is when they were actually making the announcement that the event was canceled. So you can see the line of cars, or the line of people, all the way down that hill and back up the next little ridge before they got to.
So you were saying that was about a mile from the parking lot?
It's a little over a mile, maybe a mile and a quarter. And that's taking the shortcut right through the pasture. If you'd have followed the road around, it would probably have been more than a little over a mile and a half. And keep in mind, it was probably 95, before the storm came through with, 80 or 90%
Those are
humidity.
hail clouds there.
Yeah, they did get hailed. There were actually tornadoes not too far away.
So from the time the event started to when they had to leave, how long was that? How long were they there?
They opened the gates for the public at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, they started, let me rephrase that. If you wanted to buy tickets at the event, you could start buying those at 1 o'clock, but I think they let people start coming in at about noon to park, and people that were actually parking their cars.
Are the tickets all one price?
The tickets are, I think the tickets this year were $80, $80 or $85 per person.
That includes food from the food pantry?
No, that doesn't include, that includes the concert
Okay.
and all the events that are free, but you still have to buy your own food.
Is parking free?
The parking is free. So from the location where the concert was to the Emporia exit on the turnpike was about 20 miles as the crow flies, and the sirens were all going off in Emporia. I mean, there weren't a lot of sirens in between.
You know how high the winds got there?
Well, they were high enough to tear up all the tents, and those tents were, those are, heavy duty vinyl tents, especially that giant one where the symphony played. I think since it was down, my understanding was since it was down in the little gully over the edge, that it didn't get torn up down there quite as bad as everything up top did. But anyway, just a little details about what we had. So there were 15 of us total. Well, actually 16 if you count Geraldine, who was our fearless leader. So there were 9 from the KAO in Wichita, 4 from the Salina Club, and then I went just to see what it was all about, because Geraldine is a former president of the Wichita Club, but she actually lives in St. Mary's, west of Topeka, so she would drive to Wichita every time they had meetings or anything. But she's been asking me for a couple of years to come out to this, and I finally gave in. So the ticket gates opened at 1, like I said. I think the parking started, they opened the parking at noon, so people could start parking. What they call the afternoon experiences, because they weren't all just presentations. And the different tents went from 2 to 5. Then the symphony performance started at 6:30. And then what they learned after the first few of these events is that in the first years, they never had anything planned for what people were going to do after the concert was over. And so there was this mad rush of 7,000 people to their cars. And it would take, there were some years where it took, 2 to 3 hours for all the cars to actually get back out of the area and back on a highway. So what they did was started adding some things that were going on in the evening after the concert was over to try and at least hold some of the people up at the venue so that the traffic flow was eased a little bit. And that's one of the things that we would have done. We would have done, some observing. And although you'd think it would be awesome to be observing out there in the middle of the Flint Hills, the area was lit up like a baseball field. So if you could find a place where, you'd be in the shadow from all the bright lights, because that walkway down the center was lit up, so that they didn't have to worry about people tripping and falling. But, basically, they would do observing until, what I was told is that usually went till about 10:30 or 11 o'clock, and then eventually most of the people had peeled off by then to go down to their car. So as far as the information, if anybody's interested in doing this, we had, for those of us that had equipment that we had to unload, we got 2 passes. We got the parking pass for regular parking, but we also got a gate pass, which got us up to on the venue prior to the event starting so that we could unload gear, so we weren't having to carry all that stuff a mile and a half from the parking. So we had to arrive by 10 a.m. at the latest. We had to be unloaded and back in the parking corral by 11, because 11 o'clock was when they cut off vehicle movement up on top. There was a volunteer tent down there. We picked up our T-shirts, our program, our wristband, that sort of thing. The wristband is basically, it identified you as a volunteer, as did your T-shirt, but you got a different color wristband if you're over 21. So if you wanted to go, for example, to the beer tent and buy a beer, the wristband was, how they could tell that you were old enough. Not that I don't think any of us would have an issue, but they have to do what they have to do. Like I said, you can ride the trams or walk, but it was a little bit over a mile walk on that path through the pasture from the parking to up to the venue. And you can't, except this year because of the special circumstances, you could not go get your car and bring it back up to load all your stuff up until all the guests had left, until there weren't any walkers anymore. So, which would mean if it's 11 o'clock before they let people go get their vehicles, by the time you get up top and you get all your stuff loaded and everything and you get back down and out and on the highway, probably going to be close to midnight. And there aren't a lot of hotel options in Cottonwood Falls. I'll just say that. So, you know, you'd have still had a 30-minute or 40-minute drive to Emporia if you wanted to stay. I just had figured I'd just drive back. I mean, if I get to Emporia, I'm only an hour away anyway, so I was just going to keep driving. I just got out a little earlier than I thought. You aren't required, this is one thing that I learned this year, you're not required to be there for the entire event. So if you wanted to come and help out, for example, in the afternoon when they're doing the solar observing, or help out with one of those other stations that the Stargazer tent had set up, you're free to leave when you're done with whatever it is that you're volunteered to do. Just understand that if that's your plan, you probably shouldn't be carrying a whole lot of stuff, because, you know, you're not going to be able to bring your car back up to load it up if you leave, for example, at dinner time, because you were staying for the afternoon piece. So that is something to keep in mind. There is food available for purchase, but the volunteers are allowed to bring their own if they want. So each of us brought a little cooler with, you know, lunch and dinner, basically, if we didn't want to go buy it. We had ice water was available all day long. They were really good about keeping the coolers filled up, so that wasn't a problem. But anything other than that, if you didn't want to go across and wait in line at the food tent and pay money for it, you could bring that with you as well. And then just hot and windy, I was expecting, I guess I probably should have expected it to be really dusty, but I guess I just really wasn't thinking about that. Everything that I took had a nice layer coating of dust on it when I got home. So, I mean, luckily we were solar observing, so I had a solar filter on the front end of my telescope. So the telescope was okay. The filter was a little crunchy. So next year's event is going to be a place called Wade Pasture, which is one of the rotation things. Oh, cut off my 22. So it's on June 10th. It's southwest of Eskridge, so it's not quite as far away. It's sort of, you know, more in the northern half of the Flint Hills as opposed to the central part of the Flint Hills like we were this year. So it's not going to be quite as far, but it's still out in the Flint Hills. So. But certainly if anyone is interested, Geraldine is now a member of our club too, in addition to the Wichita Club. So she couldn't be at tonight's event because she had another commitment, or tonight's meeting, but we'll see her again throughout the year. So if you have any other questions, she's been in charge of the stargazing tent since the very first year of the symphony. So she could answer any questions that you had beyond what I have the ability to answer.
Do you have the program with you, what music that was played at that symphony?
I don't. The program that they actually handed out didn't have the concert pieces in it because the general program had each area separated out, and all of the presentations, or as they call them, experiences, in each tent were listed by the times that they started and who was given the presentation and everything else. So it didn't actually list now. You may have been able to get something like that when you went down to the concert, but since we were busy packing everything up when the concert started, we didn't actually get a chance. We could hear it off in the distance, but the wind was actually blowing. As I said, it was blowing that direction, so that we were upwind of the concert too. So we didn't get to hear a lot of it. it sounded like it was much farther away than it actually was. But I put some other things up here that we might want to look at. We do have a lot of planetary oppositions. You know, Saturn's already past opposition, so it's well placed in the night sky. But Neptune and Jupiter this month, Uranus in November, and then Mars at the beginning of December. I was thinking if you guys would be interested, remember the event that we had a few years ago on top of a parking garage in association with the library that we did for the planetary observing? I think even though we're getting closer into the winter months, I mean winter doesn't usually show up here in November and early December, so those might be, you know, maybe later on in the year, you know, maybe on one side or the other of Thanksgiving might be a good time. I can certainly make some contact with we have a different person in charge of that sort of thing, but she's the same gal that we dealt with for the How-To Festival earlier this summer, so I can reach out to her and see if we can set something like that up, because that was an awesome event. For those of you that were not there, we had several hundred people show up. I couldn't tell you how many. I knew once, but I don't remember the number, how many pizzas the library went through to hand out to the people that were there. But it was a table that had stacks, you know, all the way across, and there were probably 30 pizzas, 40 pizzas anyway that they went through. But we had several hundred people there, and it was a great turnout. So, and we did the similar event for the supermoon a few years before that. We had a really good turnout too. So I think that might be a fun opportunity for some outreach later on this year. So I was contacted by Bluebird, who's the outreach and education person here at the Discovery Center, about doing something for, she wanted to do something for the Leonids, but because of the full moon, or nearly full moon, the night of the peak, this is only going to be like a 20% illuminated moon, so it'll set, you know, reasonably, at a reasonable hour in the evening. She was thinking about maybe doing an event here. I mean, the Orionids is not the greatest shower, but it might just be a fun thing that I don't think we need a lot of people. We could certainly, that time of year, we could still turn the telescopes to the planets if we don't see any meteors. So that's something that we might want to look at. I haven't seen it officially on their calendar yet, but I told her if they decide to do it, that you know, we could get some people out here for that. And then we have an early morning total lunar eclipse on November 8th. This is kind of like that one we did, I don't remember how many years ago that was, where the maximum eclipse is about 5 a.m. in the morning, and basically for us the eclipse is over when the sky starts brightening for sunrise. But we did that one out at the Lead Center parking lot. Had a few people show up, so that's maybe an option for something that we could do. And that's on a Tuesday. And then our fall meeting schedule, obviously we're meeting tonight, Sunday the 25th, Sunday the 30th of October, and then December 4th. I have a commitment from Bruce Twarog to do the December presentation, but the subject is yet to be determined. And I was kind of hoping maybe, Parker, if you think you might be ready, you could do one of those. Not going to pressure you into answering me tonight.
How short can it be?
Huh?
How short can it be?
I don't care. It's your presentation. But we'll get the other ones buttoned up here and let everybody know. The dates are on the Facebook page, but I don't think they're on the website yet. So I'll talk to them.
Let's see, is Halloween the 31st of October?
Halloween is the 31st every year, yeah. So there might be something fun we could do with that. Maybe get some of the people from the Discovery Center to promote that one. Maybe not so much the meeting, but the observing afterwards. Maybe we could give out a little candy and
Yeah.
have a costume competition or something.